Rick Snyder's ass is going to end up in jail. This is the latest update on the Flint water crisis. The governor's emails have been released, and this is beyond a smoking gun. This is a gun pointing directly at the governor's head, with the gun cocked, bullet in the chamber, and ready to fire.
So this is a big story. Super Tuesday, obviously this Tuesday, March 1st. Then there are a few caucuses and a couple primaries on the 5th and 6th of March over the weekend. But the next big bolus of delegates after Super Tuesday is 1 week exactly after Super Tuesday. It's March 8th. There are 4 primaries on March 8th. And the big one, the big kahuna with 59 delegates that day, the first big delegate prize after Super Tuesday is Michigan. And there's something going on in Michigan right now. Let's say you were the governor of a state and 9 people died in your state, possibly because of you, because of negligence and horrifically bad management by your administration. If you were the governor who had that news to deliver to your constituents, how would you do it? Now, I don't know you. I can only occasionally see you through the television, but still, I doubt you would do it like this.
The issue I'm going to discuss is really dealing with Genesee County. What was presented to me was information that over the course of 2014 and 2015, we saw a spike in Legionnaire's disease. In terms of the spike, in terms of the specific numbers, I was told about this a couple of days ago, and then basically I thought it should be shared as part of this whole process.
That was how Michigan Governor Rick Snyder announced a really big Legionnaire's disease outbreak in his state. Almost 90 people got sick, 9 people were killed, 9 people died just in one Michigan county. And that outbreak very possibly was connected to the same malpractice of government by which the Rick Snyder administration lead poisoned the city of Flint when an emergency manager who reported to Governor Snyder switched the town's water source to save money. The Legionnaire's disease part of this saga is just horrendous. Literally, people died. And when Governor Snyder announced it in January, he made a point of saying right off the bat, right at his initial announcement of this deadly outbreak, that he wanted you to be sure that he didn't know, he wanted you to be sure to know that he didn't know about it until just a couple of days ago. He just found out about it just then. We now know, turns out, his office did know a long time before that. One of Governor Snyder's top staffers, Harvey Hullins, knew about the outbreak last March, which is 10 months before the governor announced that he hadn't known anything about it. 10 months before Governor Snyder said that, the governor's office got this email from a state agency. It says, quote, more than 40 cases reported since last April. That's a significant uptick, more than all the cases reported in the last 5 years or more combined. The governor's office was told that the county health department had, quote, made the leap formally that the uptick in cases is directly attributable to the river as a drinking water source. Well, today, Governor Snyder released more emails from his office related to the Flint water crisis, and now we know his office knew about this deadly outbreak even earlier. Look, quote, 42 cases of Legionnaire's disease in Genesee County since last May. I'll explain more on the phone. The date on that email is January of last year. So, with Michigan residents literally dying from this, Governor Snyder says he had no idea until this year. But his governor's office email traffic shows communications about it even a year before he ever said anything to the public. A year before Governor Snyder admits he'd ever heard anything about it. As the presidential campaign steams toward Michigan on March 8th, the first big delegate prize after Super Tuesday, Michigan's Republican governor is in a frenzy right now of firing and reassigning and accepting the resignations of and suspending high-profile members of his staff and his cabinet. The spokesman for the State Environmental Agency, the director of the State Environmental Agency, 2 people so far from the Drinking Water Division of the state government. Yesterday it was the governor's communications director and his press secretary. Everyone must go. Everything must go. And now we've got this enormous new stash of thousands of pages of material from Governor Snyder's office that was just released. Reporters, including our own producers at this show, have spent the day and will spend the next several days going through all this stuff. But honestly, just from what we've gone through thus far, it looks devastating for Governor Rick Snyder. Let's just take one example. Even before news organizations were reporting high levels of lead in Flint water, people who lived in Flint knew there was something wrong with the water. It was so bad 6 months after Flint started drinking from the river that the local GM plant, the local General Motors plant, took itself off Flint water. They quit using the city's water at the plant because it was corroding the automobile parts that they made. When that happened, here's what Rick Snyder's top environment advisor wrote in an email to the governor's chief of staff and others. She said, quote, "I think we should ask the emergency manager to consider coming back to the Detroit water system in full or in part as an interim solution to both the quality and now the financial problems that the current solution is causing. I see this as an urgent matter to fix." The governor's top lawyer then replies to that email, quote, "Good gravy. To anyone who grew up in Flint, as I did, the notion that I'd be getting my drinking water from the Flint River is downright scary. Too bad the emergency manager didn't ask me what I thought, though I'm sure he heard it from plenty of others. My mom is a city resident. Nice to know she's drinking water with elevated chlorine levels and fecal coliform. I agree with Valerie. They should try to get back on the Detroit system as a stopgap ASAP before this thing gets too far out of control." That was a conversation in the governor's office, October 2014, 6 months into the Flint River water fiasco. These are people who work for Governor Snyder. These are governor's office emails. But again, Rick Snyder did nothing, even with this top-level discussion among his top-level advisors, despite these explicit and disgusted warnings from Rick Snyder's top environmental advisor and his top lawyer. They did nothing. They left Flint to keep drinking that water day after day, week after week, month after month, for another year after that discussion happened in the governor's office. And that's just one example. Here's another one. March 2015. On March 2015, Flint had been drinking this water for almost a year, and the governor's chief of staff wrote this, quote, "How about buying some water for the people for a time? $250,000 would buy a lot of drinking water, and we could distribute it through the churches while we continue to make the water even safer. If we procrastinate much longer in doing something direct, we'll have real trouble." You think this might be real trouble? Real trouble. This is real trouble. Like testifying before Congress trouble. Like testifying before state lawmakers trouble. Like FBI criminal investigation trouble. Like EPA criminal investigation trouble. Like calls for the governor's resignation trouble. And in some real way, now, the cracking of the wall that has so far protected Rick Snyder, governor of Michigan, and kept him in his job. Governor Snyder, since this blew open, he has continually kept as much distance as he could between himself personally and the idea that he knew what was going on in Flint. But in an interview today, in response to this new raft of emails becoming public, a man named Dennis Muchmore, who was Rick Snyder's former chief of staff, the guy who predicted real trouble, Dennis Muchmore said today that he and others in the Snyder administration discussed their concerns about Flint with the governor, directly, personally. Quote, "We shared them." Look, there's only so much distance that Governor Rick Snyder can get from his own responsibility here. There's only so much plausible deniability and only so much, hey, I didn't know, never heard of it. There are only so many emails like these that can come out. There are only so many staffers he can fire or send to the backwoods of state government. There's only so much protective space he can clear around himself before it becomes evident that he's the guy standing in the spotlight alone who did it, who allowed it to happen. There's only so much of his own governorship that can still stand before holding that office becomes untenable for him. Are we there yet?
Yes, we are. That motherfucker needs to resign, and there are going to be lawsuits up the yin-yang, given the fact that all these emails exist, and the governor's office knew, and he specifically knew. So the families of the 10 people that died from Legionnaire disease are going to sue. The families of the 100 people who contracted Legionnaire's disease are going to sue. And every last single resident of Flint should join in a class action lawsuit against the state of Michigan in order to get enough money to get out of Flint, Michigan, and their houses sold for fair market value pre-Flint River water crisis.